Well, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. And here we are, ready or not, it is Sabbath is upon us. And hope you guys all had a great week, great work week. Hope you're ready for that rest. And that kind of threw me off this week. If I sound a little disjointed right now, that 30-second countdown clock, it was supposed to go down without a hitch. Hopefully it did. And I actually, because usually, I hit the let's go button, right, the record button, I just jump into it. And I was getting all nervous. It was just counting down. I'm like, oh no, we're about to go live. So anyways, hopefully you guys enjoyed that. And why am I also excited? Well, we just finished a year's worth of Torah portions. And last week we finished Deuteronomy. I felt like that was a big accomplishment. And I'm excited to be back in Genesis. And, one of the things that many rabbinical commentators have mentioned and scribes through the years is that within the first 6 chapters of Genesis, you can basically take all the theology, all the doctrines, everything that you're going to see in the rest of canon, and it's going to be there. Like everything is referring back to the first 6 chapters and vice versa. And so I'm going to be taking my time going through the book of Genesis, particularly the first 6 chapters. Chapter 1 alone, I'm thinking is going to maybe take, don't quote me on this, but maybe 7 or 8 weeks. I'm not really sure at this point. So tonight we're going to be looking at specifically Genesis 1:1. Really quickly, my intent tonight is not to convince anybody that that is a recreation event, that there was a world before our current world, but I will be showing you a lot of textual evidence to make that case. Not that I'm trying to convince anybody. However that sounds. All right, so let me just point this out. Here's our new fundraiser for the month of October. Thank you, everybody who gave last month, Patreon, as well as through GoFundMe or PayPal or whatever. And you guys are making this possible. You guys are awesome. Thank you for taking part in Yah's blessing. And here's a new product we have in our store. This is Blackbeard Creek Original Seasoning. This comes from yours truly, Paulie Hart. And here's what he says about it. I'll just read this off really quickly. The legend of Blackbeard's treasure remained a mystery for many years. Down on the forgotten coast of Georgia, there remains the final resting place of Blackbeard's treasure. What many people believe to be a golden hoard was instead a golden scroll with a forgotten secret. Experience the bold and kicking flavor of the spices from the 7 seas. Experience Blackbeard Creek Original Seasoning. And of course, for those of you who are Patreon subscribers, you know that whatever you gave to this ministry every single month, whether it's $5, $15, $30, $50, $75, $100, $150, we give you the same amount back in a coupon to spend in our store. This is something you can redeem it with. And you can get yourself some Blackbeard Creek Original Seasoning from our store. I'm only really interested in putting top-notch stuff in there. So thank you, Paulie. And here's just a lot of the books that we have in there, and a lot of these are originals. You see right there, Daba Rayam. This is Pamela's Paleo translation of Deuteronomy, which we just finished, and we're going through Genesis again. You see Bereshith up here. We'll be going through this for the remaining, year. I don't know how long it's going to take to go through Genesis. And this is right down here, Heidi. This is Rebecca. We support Rebecca here, and this was her passion project to turn out Heidi. She does phenomenal editing work. So just something to consider. We also launched this week, Shells of Shalom Publishing. And this is an imprint of the Unexpected Cosmology. Of course, we're a publishing company, but this is purely fiction that we're putting out. And so if you are a fictional writer and you want to send in a transcript and you're interested in getting published, then I have links for Shells of Shalom under this YouTube channel. I'll be putting them under all of them from here on out. And you can contact Jennifer Hartz, who runs it, and we'll get going on that. Also, one more thing to note is baptisms. If you are interested in getting baptized, please do not hesitate. That is, I'm not doing a study on that tonight, but it is of the gravest importance. And so we have a list here on the website of different people. We have one person, for example, in South Africa. We have Nebraska, California, Georgia, Washington. Of course, I'm in South Carolina right now. I'll be in Florida for the next few months, and of course someone in New Hampshire, and you can contact us and we get you baptized. All right, creation and recreation. Tonight we'll be talking about Meru, Atlantis, the Prince of Tyre. Maybe I'll get to mud fossils, we'll see, because I have a lot of material to cover. So let's do this.
The first book of Moses, Bereshayath, chapter 1. First creation by Elohim. In the former time periods, as a powerful sign of working, chief son and heir Elohim filled with choice things, behold, as a sign Shemayim, the place of the names, and behold, as a sign Aratz, the chief place of running. But observe how Aratz was unorganized and empty, and Sheshach rose up from the deep waters, went up to its face, but the Ruach Elohim, as a wall of protection, moved violently upon the surface of the waters. Elohim then declared, light he will exist, and light he will exist. And Elohim gazed upon that beautiful light, and Elohim made distinctive the light from the darkness. And to the light Elohim called out the name Ya'um, and to the darkness he called out the name Leah Laha. This was the close and the dawn of the first age. Elohim also declared, he will exist, Rakuya, between the waters, and let it be a division between the waters and the waters. And Elohim fashioned the Rakuya, and it divided the waters which were above the Rakuya. They hammered out expanse, and it was done. And Elohim called out the hammer out expanse Hashemayim. This was the close and the dawn of the second age. Elohim then commanded, let the waters below Hashemayim be collected in one place, and let dry land appear, and that was done. And Elohim called out the dry land Aratz, and the accumulated waters he named Yamayim, seas. And Elohim admired their beauty. Elohim then declared, let the Haaretz produce seed-bearing vegetation as well as fruit trees according to their several species, capable of reproducing upon the Haaretz. And that was done. The Haaretz produced the seed-bearing herbage according to every species of reproductive fruit trees, and Elohim saw that it was good. This was the close and the dawn of the third age. Elohim further declared, let there exist from lights in the firmament of Hashemayim for a distinction between the day and between the night, and let them serve for signs and for appointed times and for time periods and years, and let them also illuminate the firmament of the sky so as to gift light upon Haaretz. And that was done. Elohim fashioned two lights from the light, the greater from light to have dominion over the day, and the smaller from light to control the night, accompanied by the stars. And Elohim had gifted them in the hammered out expanse so as to illuminate Haaretz, to have dominion over the day and to have a dominion over the night, and to mark the division between the light and the darkness. And Elohim saw they were beautiful. This was the close and the dawn of the fourth age. Elohim further declared, let there exist from lights in the firmament of Hashemayim for a distinction between the day and between the night, and let them serve for signs and for appointed times and for time periods and years. And let them also illuminate the firmament of the sky so as to give light upon Haaretz. And that was done. Elohim fashioned two lights from light, the greater from light to have dominion over the day, and the smaller from light to control the night, accompanied by the stars. And Elohim had gifted them in a hammered out expanse so as to illuminate Haaretz, to have a dominion over the day, and to have dominion over the night, and to mark the division between the light and the darkness. And Elohim saw they were beautiful. This was the close and the dawn of the fourth age. Elohim then said, let the waters be swarming with animal life, and let winged fowl fly above Haaretz over the face of the expanse of Hashemayim. Elohim accordingly produced the monsters of the deep, Thunuyanu, or dragons, and the waters abounded with living Nephash, swarmers, and also produced every species of winged fowl, and Elohim admired their beauty. And Elohim, he did barak them, declaring, be fruitful and multiply, so as to fill the waters of the deep, and also let the winged creatures multiply upon Aratz. This was the close and the dawn of the fifth age. Elohim then declared, let Haaretz produce living Nephash according to its species. Elohim then declared, let Haaretz produce living Nephash according to its species, quadrupeds, reptiles, and all wild animals answering to their species. And that was done. Alayam accordingly made the various species of the animals of Ha'arats, as well as several species of quadrupeds, and all the different species of reptiles, and Alayam admired their beauty. Creation of man under the shadow of Alayam. Alayam then declared, "Let us fashion Adam under our shadow, like our appearance, and subject to them the fish of the waters, and the winged fowl of Hashemayam, and the quadrupeds, as well as the whole of Ha'arats, and every creeping reptile that creeps upon it." So Alayam created Adam under his own shadow, creating them in the shadow of Alayam, and constituting them male and female. Alayam, as a powerful sign, he did barak them, and Alayam declared to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, so as to fill Ha'arats and subdue it, and rule over the fish of the sea, and the birds of Hashemayam, and over every living creature that moves upon Ha'arats." Alayam also declared, "See, I have given to you food of every fruit, and grain-bearing plant upon the surface of the whole Arats, as well as fruit and seed-bearing trees and all vegetation, so that they may be food for you, and for every animal of the Harats, and for every winged fowl of the skies, and for every reptile upon Harats, which possesses the life of animals." And it was done. And Alayam gazed upon all that he made, and it was very beautiful. Thus the close came of the 6th age. Thus Hashemayam and Ha'arats were completed, as well as their armies, and Alayam rested at the 7th age from all the works which he had made, and therefore Alayam he did barak the 7th day, and he did kadosh it, because he then rested from all the work which Alayam had arranged to do. The First Book of Moses, Bereshit, Chapter 1. First creation by Alayam.
Let me stop there because it's going to keep playing. Thank you, Sean, for doing that for me and whipping that together this week. And that was our very own Sean Walking Bear, for those of you who were curious. And so let's get into it. So we're going to be looking at just Genesis 1 this week. And here's the King James in front of you. That was the Paleo Hebrew, in case you are new here. And I need to kind of make sure I'm letting people know that if you're curious, like, what translation is that? And of course, Pamela, Miss Pamela from our group, is basically translated the whole Torah in the Paleo this last year. It was amazingly done. So without further ado, here's the KJV. It says, "In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void." That's what we're going to be looking at tonight. In the Targum, it says this: "At the beginning, Yahweh, or Yahuwah, created the heavens and the earth was vacancy and desolation, solitary of the sons of men, and void of every animal." Now, why would they put that in there? It's giving you this picture that there were men and there were animals, and then there were not. Otherwise, it's like, why put that in there, since we already know that they're going to be created within the following chapter? Actually, as I'll be showing you in the coming weeks, that in the Paleo Hebrew, what Pamela can't really, I've had talks with Pamela for years on this now, and what we can't really find on there is many creation words. Everyone assumes that everything is being created in Genesis 1, but that's not necessarily the case. What we can show is that the sun and the moon were created during the creation week, but it appears that the animals, the plants, the seeds, things like that, they're coming from these stockpiles, these barns that Yah has, that he is replenishing the earth with them. We see this. This is, of course, from the Paleo translation. "In the former time periods," I love that. I absolutely love that. "In the former time periods, as a powerful sign of working, chief son and heir Elohim filled with choice things. Behold, as a sign, Shamayam, the place of the names, and behold, as a sign, Arat," and that would be the earth, "the chief place of running. But observe, the earth, the Ha'arat, was unorganized and empty. And Chisak rose up from the deep waters, went up to its face, but the Ruach Elohim, as a wall of protection, moved violently upon the surface of the waters." That is so epic what's going on. Again, we're not going to be dealing with all that tonight. That will be another week. I'm going to be talking about the Ruach going over the waters, and the Cheshach, the actual spiritual entity coming up out of the deep waters to challenge the heir to the throne, who is, of course, Yahuwah. This is what it says in Sefer of the Two Pearls, chapter 2. "In the beginning, Elohim," of course, that would be the modern Hebrew name for God, whereas Elohim would be the paleo. In the beginning, Elohim made the heavens and the earth. The earth became formless and deserted. So that's interesting. That actually complements the Aramaic Targum very well. And darkness was upon the shaft of the pit. And again, the very focus here that there is an abyss. What is the abyss? The abyss is where the dead goes. This is where Leviathan is. This is where the spirits of the dead go. And it's like, this is one of the entryways to Sheol. So why is there such an emphasis on the place of death in the very opening sentence of the Bible? And the spirit of Yahweh hovered over the surface of the seas. And Elohim said, let there be light. And there was the word, the lights of men. Men were in the darkness, and the light overpowered the darkness, but men saw it not. Well, that's interesting. Is this talking about a future generation, or is this something happening at that time, that there were entities that were being illuminated by this light that came into the world? Of course, this light, I believe, is the declaration that Yeshua, Jesus Christos, if you prefer, I believe that Yahweh is the Son. He is later declared to be Yeshua, which means salvation, that he is the light that came in, that as the heir of creation, he is announced that he's now in control. And so we see this rebellion kicking off right away. Again, I'll be talking about that in future weeks. So let's look at this idea of silence, this primeval silence. As I was gathering all the scripture together for this presentation tonight, I started noticing this theme, and I want to present this idea that these resets happen often enough, every so many thousands of years, and they seem to be noted. There seems to be the silence that complements it. So 2 Ezra 6:38 says this: I said, "O Yahweh, you spoke at the beginning of creation and said, on the first day, let heaven and earth be made, and your word accomplished the work. Then the Spirit was blowing, and darkness and silence embraced everything. The sound of human voices was not yet there." And the Ethiopian says, "was not yet from you." So it would be the sound of human voices was not yet from you, which is kind of interesting too. I mean, you could take that in two completely different ways. Specifically, if Adam, the eighth day Adam, was a unique creation from Yahweh. Then you commanded a ray of light to be brought out from your storehouses so that your works could be seen. And there it is right there. And this is 2 Esdras. And so it seems like whatever was replenished on the earth in that creation week comes from these storehouses. They already existed up in the heavens. And you can make cases for that all throughout Scripture. The Book of Creation says this: Elohim. Now, I guess I should just say God here, since it's British, but God passed through the spaces of the heavens above with a mighty roar and a loud trumpeting. Then came the grim, dead silence and black, red, lit twilight of doom. Now, the context of this is that this is talking about, in 2 Esdras, we're seeing that there was this darkness and silence on the first day of creation. Well, the Book of Creation here is talking about what's leading up to that recreation event. We're going to be visiting this tonight. And it says that leading up to it, it is this dead silence. So that silence continues over into 2 Esdras. Then came the grim, dead silence and black, red, lit twilight of doom. Great fires and smoke rose up from the ground, and men gasped for air. The land was rent asunder and swept clean by a mighty deluge of waters. A hole opened up in the middle of the land. The waters entered, and it sank beneath the seas. Now, isn't it interesting that according to Genesis, when the light switch goes on, he says, "Let there be light," and there's just water everywhere. It actually never says in the book of Genesis that he created water on the first day. The water is already there. And then, of course, the land comes up out of the water. Well, then we see leading into the millennial kingdom, and this is going to come from 2 Esdras. Let's see what it says here. After those years, my son, the Messiah, shall die, and all who draw human breath. Then the world shall be turned back to primeval silence. This is the primeval silence we are seeing in Genesis 1 for 7 days, as it was at the first beginnings, so that no one shall be left. So what this is saying here, well, let's finish this. After 7 days, the world that is not yet awake shall be roused, and that which is corruptible shall perish. This is fascinating because it's actually saying that leading into the millennial kingdom, when Messiah reigns for 1,000 years over the earth, that there is going to be basically everyone is going to die. And for 7 days, the earth is going to sit solitary, chaos, void, darkness, primeval silence, just as it was in Genesis 1:1. So you get that feeling that we don't know. I guess I don't know how long the earth was dark and void. It could have been 7,000, 14,000 years. It could have been 7 days. I don't really know. But you see a common theme there. We see in the Book of the Two Pearls, chapter 20, it says, and this is, by the way, at the end of the, at the end of the little season. This is going to be a repeat event and it happens again. So we have Genesis 1:1, everybody dies, lights go down, dead silence, lights go on, chaos and void. When the millennial kingdom kicks into gear, the lights go off, everybody lays down again, chaos and void, silence, lights go back up. The same thing is going to happen in the future after the millennial kingdom, at the end of the little season. After this, a holy rest will come upon the Messiah and his followers in order that they feel not the pain of the purifying fire of Elohim. All things will be burned up and the earth will lie in silence for less than 1/2 hour. So this one isn't 7 days exactly, one less than, I don't know what, 20 minutes, 25 minutes, I don't know, but still the lights go off and the fire purifies everything. A lot of people are dying. The earth will itself be renewed to eternal life. Then all will awaken from their holy rest, and the new city of Elohim will appear. For this city must descend upon purified ground in order to be holy forever. So for those of you right there having the theological argument about whether or not New Jerusalem comes down during the millennial kingdom or afterwards, there is a point in the court for those who are saying it comes down after the little season of deception and not during the millennial kingdom. Now, when we're talking about the world that perished before Genesis 1:1, people bring up 2 Peter a lot. And I'm not sure that this is really, I don't think, now I wasn't there when Peter wrote this letter. I don't think that was in his mindset. I think he's referring to Noah's flood. Nevertheless, the principle still applies, and he says this: for this they willingly are ignorant of, that by the word of Elohim the heavens were of old, and the earth standing out of the water and in the water, whereby the world that then was, being overflowed with water, perished. And now the reason is he's saying, but the heavens and the earth, which are now by the same word, are kept in store, reserved into fire against the day of judgment and perdition of wicked men. Of course, what Kefa is trying to make the case here for is that he's saying the destruction of the world by way of water is the old way of doing things. The mile marker cutoff was Noah's flood going into Sodom and Gomorrah. And from now on, the worldwide judgment is fire, which we just saw with the primeval silence of the water and then the fire. So again, is he talking about Noah's flood here, or is he talking about Genesis 1:1? He could be talking about both. That might be a moot point. Not really sure. Genesis chapter 9, we see that again, it says, and Elohim said, or Elohim said, the context here is Noah's flood, or at least afterwards, this is the sign of the covenant which I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you for perpetual generations. I do set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be for a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. And it shall come to pass when I bring a cloud over the earth that the bow shall be seen in the cloud, and I will remember my covenant, which is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh. And here's what I want you to see right here. And the waters shall no more become a flood to destroy all flesh. So again, it doesn't say, Elohim is not saying necessarily that the destroying the world was a one-time event, nor is he saying that it was a several-time event. You could kind of read either arguments into that. But again, I think that the world probably was destroyed several times by water, and we'll see more of that. And the rainbow is there to promise that he won't do it again, as a reminder. So one of the arguments that the old earthers will use is the idea of a perfect work, or I'm sorry, a chaos and a void not being part of a perfect work. Whether you're young, I've seen young earth creationists make really good arguments in the opposite direction. I think it's really important to look at an argument from two different sides. Nevertheless, this is what it says in Infancy Gospel of Thomas, chapter 17. And the multitude that stood by saw it and marveled and then said, of a truth, this young child is either Elohim or an angel of Elohim. And they're talking about the young child, Yeshua. For every word of his is a perfect work. And Yeshua departed thence and was playing with other children. And so the idea is that if, can you have a chaos and a void and still be a perfect work, right? That's the argument. We see this in 2nd Ezra chapter 6. And I said, O Yahweh, you spoke from the beginning of the creation, even the first day, and said thus, let heaven and earth be made, and your word was a perfect work. So again, why do you have a chaos and a void in there if it is a perfect work, right? 2nd Ezra chapter 6. I have the same. Well, let's see what this says. I said, O Yahweh, you spoke at the beginning of creation and said on the first day, let heaven and earth be made, and your word accomplish the work. Then the Ruach was blowing, and darkness and silence embraced everything. The sound of human voices was not yet there, or was not from you. Okay, so I did read this a little earlier. Then you commanded a ray of light to be brought out from your storehouses so that your works could be seen. Contrarily, again, void does not have to mean his work is imperfect. And this is what it says in Book of Creation, chapter 1, verse 6. Earth was not yet in existence. There were no winds with the sky above them. High mountains were not raised, nor was the great river in its place. All was formless, without movement, calm, silent, void, and dark. No name had been named, and no destinies foreshadowed. Now, if you understand the context of a Book of Creation, it's just made a fallacy in the whole argument of void and chaos or whatever is an imperfect work, because they are talking about when the earth was actually formed before Genesis, like thousands and thousands, maybe millions of years before Genesis 1-2. And they're saying that at the very beginning, there was a void and darkness, right, over the earth. It was formless and so on and so forth. All right, so this is what it says in Jeremiah. What we're going to start doing is we're going to, for the next so many minutes, I'm going to be taking you through Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, some of the prophets and some other texts, and showing you their possible references to the pre-creation. Then we're going to get into Atlantis and that kind of stuff. Jeremiah chapter 4 says this, I beheld the earth, and lo, it was without form. And you can see there, I actually put the Hebrew word tohu, and void, and the heavens, and they had no light. I beheld the mountains, and lo, they trembled, and all the hills moved lightly. I beheld, and lo, there was no man, and all the birds of the heavens were fled. I beheld, and lo, the fruitful place was a wilderness, and all the cities thereof were broken down at the presence of Yahweh and by his fierce anger. Now, the word tohu is without form, and that's Strong's Concordance 8418. It means formlessness, confusion, unreality, emptiness. And so right here, you see the word being used specifically in the context that you have this civilization that is being destroyed in Yahweh's fierce anger, and it is going into the state of tohu. So again, and that is the same word that we see in Genesis 1 being used. Now, in the context of Jeremiah chapter 4, it's talking about Judah being threatened with invasion. He's saying this is what's going to happen to Yehuda. And so you can go down here. I'm not going to read this whole thing for you guys. And there it is right there. I looked at the earth, and behold, it was formless and desolate emptiness, and to the heavens, and they had no lights. I looked on the mountains, and behold, they were quaking, and all the hills jolted back and forth. I looked, and behold, there was no human, and all the birds of the sky had fled. I looked, and behold, the fruitful land was a wilderness, and all its cities were pulled down before Yahweh, before his fierce anger. And that's Jeremiah chapter 4. Now, when we get into the book of Ezekiel, we see the destroyer of worlds, the desolation of the earth in Ezekiel. And this is the popular Prince of Tyre passage. Now, in the 11th year, on the first of the month, the word of Yahweh came to me, saying, Son of man, because Tyre has said in regard to Jerusalem, aha, the gateway of the peoples is broken. It has opened to me. I shall be filled now that she is laid waste. Therefore, this is what Yahweh Elohim says, Behold, I am against you, Tyre, and I will bring up many nations against you, as the sea brings up its waves. They will destroy the walls of Tyre and tear down her towers, and I will sweep her debris away from her and make her a bare rock. She will become a dry place for the spreading of nets in the midst of the sea, for I have spoken, declares Yahweh Elohim, and she will become plunder for the nations. Also her daughters who are on the mainland will be killed by the sword, and they will know that I am Yahweh. For Yahweh Elohim says this, Behold, I'm going to bring upon Tyre from the north Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, king of kings, with horses, chariots, cavalry, and a great army. He will kill your daughters on the mainland with the sword, and he will make siege walls against you, pile up an assault ramp against you, and raise up a large shield against you. And he will direct the blow of his battering rams against your walls, and he will tear down your towers with his axes because of the multitude of his horses. The dust raised by them will cover you. Your walls will shake from the noise of cavalry, wagons, and chariots. When he enters your gates as warriors enter a city that is breached, with the hooves of his horses, he will trample all your streets. He will kill your people with the sword, and your strong pillars will go down to the ground. Also, they will take your riches as spoils and plunder your merchandise, tear down your walls and destroy your delightful houses, and throw your stones, your timbers, and your debris into the water. So I will put an end to the sound of your songs, and the sound of your harps will no longer be heard. I will turn you into a bare rock. You will become a dry place for the spreading of nets. You will not be rebuilt, for I, Yahweh, have spoken, declares Yahweh Elohim. Let me just jump down here. For this is what Yahweh Elohim says, When I make you a desolate city, like the cities which are not inhabited, when I bring up the deep over you, and the great waters cover you. So I want you to picture this, right? So cities are not going to be inhabited. They're going to be destroyed. And then why is he talking now? All of a sudden, the deep, the great deep, that what we saw in Genesis 1, coming up over you, the great waters are covering you. Then I will bring you down with those who go down to the pit. And of course, there was the Chesak creature coming up out of the pit, which again, we'll be looking at in another week. To the people of old. That's interesting. So he's saying now, I'm going to be taking you to the people of old, the last time the waters covered the earth, right? And I will make you remain in the lower parts of the earth, down in Sheol, like the ancient ruins, with those who go down to the pit, so that you will not be inhabited, but I will put glory in the land of the living. I will cause you sudden terrors, and you will no longer exist. Though you will be sought, you will never be found again, declares Yahweh Elohim. That comes from Ezekiel 26. Now, speaking of Tyre, we get into this popular passage right here. This is just jumping over 2 chapters in Ezekiel. Moreover, the word of Yahweh came unto me, saying, Son of Adam, take up a lamentation upon the king of Zor, and saying to him, Thus says Adonai Yahuwah, you seal up the sum full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. You have been in Eden, the garden of Elohim. Every precious stone was your covering, this sardius, topaz, and the diamond, the beryl, the onyx, and the jasper, the sapphire, the emerald, and the carbuncle, and gold. The workmanship of your tabrets and of your pipes was prepared in you in the day that you were created. You are the anointed cherub that covers. And that's speaking of a cherubim angel. And I have set you so. You were upon the holy mountain of Elohim. You have walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire. You were perfect in your ways from the day that you were created till iniquity was found in you. By the multitude of your merchandise, they have filled the midst of you with violence, and you have sinned. Therefore, I will cast you as profane out of the mountain of Elohim, and I will destroy you, O covering Kerov, or you could say cherubim, from the midst of the stones of fire. Your heart was lifted up because of your beauty. You have corrupted your wisdom by reason of your brightness. I will cast thee to the ground. I will lay thee before kings, that they may behold you. You have defiled your sanctuaries by the multitude of your iniquities, by the iniquity of your traffic. Therefore will I bring forth a fire from the midst of you. It shall devour you, and I will bring you to ashes upon the earth in the sight of all them that behold you. And they that know you among the people shall be astonished at you. You shall be a terror, and never shall you be anymore. Now, I'm not going to comment too much on this tonight. It has been commented upon many times. However, I will say that I am not convinced that this entity is Ha-Satan, the one we know as Ha-Satan. If I had to guess, Azazel, or Sataneo, whatever you want to call him, the dragon creature is more of a seraphim angel, more like almost like a basilisk type. And I don't believe the cherubim are. I actually think this is a different entity. And again, doesn't have to be an argument over this, but I think this is a different entity that was in the seats that eventually Adam occupied in the pre-existent world, obviously before Adam, right? I mean, I don't think that this is after Adam. I don't think Adam was, kicked out and then a cherubim went into his place and then he got kicked out. I mean, we have no record otherwise of that. It seems to be chronologically the old existence. And as you can see here, that the big problem that apparently Yahweh had with him is in his merchandise, his trade, his greed, his whatever is going on with that. All right. And, now that I'm thinking about it, I wish I would have had the scripture here to show that actually Eden pre-existed Genesis chapter 1, the garden that was planted in there. It actually is pre-existed in the old world, and I'll be covering more of that a little bit next week. So speaking of these cities of old, here's one right here out of Cuba, just right outside of Cuba. It's an underwater city, was discovered close to the Bermuda Triangle. It was found in, I guess, 2001 by marine engineer Pauline Zalitsky and her husband, Paul Weinswig. And they claim that, you can take this for what it's worth. They say that the city is about 50,000 years old. How they come up with that, analyzing submerged stuff under the salt water, kind of 50,000. I mean, I don't know how they can tell it's not 3,000 years old, whatever. I think everyone could at least agree this is pre-diluvian in terms of Noah's flood. You could see this amazing pyramid here. But the thought is that this would be pre-deluge, like this is before Genesis 1-2 material right here. Ancient city. And here, so you can see on a map. I think I need more coffee. Sorry, guys. I feel a little choppy tonight. And you know what it is that I actually prepared this like over a week ago. And so usually I'm used to preparing something and getting right out there and doing it. And so like I'm still thinking about things I was preparing for next week today. So I'm kind of a little off tonight. My apologies. I think I need more coffee and I'll get into this. But you can see a kind of a scan there. You can see like, I don't know if that's 3 pyramids, but that's pretty incredible. And then there's a whole city complex right there. You can see how big these stones are compared to the scuba divers going down there. And I think, I'm not 100% positive, I think this is from the same city. I was trying to study this, and I don't think those are elongated skulls there. I think they're just because you see the men next to them, and there's like women, man, woman, man, woman, man. And I think that the long, what looks like long skulls is just kind of hair in a bun. I could be wrong about that. I think they just have normal size heads. And here's a few more. I'm not sure if this is. It's hard to know what's AI anymore. If that's legit or not. That looks that looks pretty legit. So apparently that's a bunch of statues down there, like a graveyard of statues. But then we get this other one. This one's far more phenomenal. This is called Yonaguni in Japan, or just outside of Japan. Yonaguni underwater city in Japan. And this thing is massive. And you just look at these slabs compared to, I don't know, is that guy, let's just say he's 6 foot. I mean, maybe he's 5'5". I don't really know. But let's just say he's 6 foot. Those stones are so massive. If those are even stepping stones, I don't know. But you could barely climb over those things as a mortal human today. Massive. And then again, you see here as they're scuba diving around it. And here's kind of a mock-up map. The main terrace, upper terrace. There's apparently a triangular pool, probably for the priests, are probably into cleansing practices back then. I don't even know what that is. Turtles back there. And they even found a road that goes around it. So pretty awesome place. And here's some of the, it looks almost Egyptian, doesn't it? It's just telling you, like, whatever was coming in through Egypt or Babylonian, Sumerian culture, it seems to be just passed down from an earlier existence, spiritually speaking. All right. And I think this is a legitimate pyramid from that same sign. Again, it's really tough to tell when you're researching this stuff, what is legitimate and what is not. But, is this just in a fish tank? I really don't know, but it looks to be like a ziggurat pyramid there at the Japan site. And this is what another mock-up of what they think it would have looked like on an island before it was submerged into the ocean, with these massive, massive walls. It's huge, huge place. All right, so here's another text, and this one just straight up says it. This is called The Desolation of Nakash. This comes from the Sefer, or the Book of the Two Pearls. And it says, in the beginning was a seraph. Now, in Ezekiel, it talks about a cherubim. So, are there some wires getting crossed here, or were there, again, I think this Nakash character is likely the Azazel that we have today. In the beginning was a seraph of the order of the heavenly host of Yahweh. His name was Nakash. He was given authority over the earth generations before man. This is the book of Nakash and how he became null and void. Now, it should really read Sefer, and this is the whole book, by the way. Like I think verses 1 through 5, I think this is the whole book. Nakash led the third part of the seraphs of fire and peace in paradise. Trees were gold and leaves were the color of jasper and other fine jewels. From earth, he saw how Yahweh loved the only begotten ones more than him. Nakash influenced his army to do the evil thing and tempt Yahweh. And Elohim sent Michael, Gabriel, Uriel, Raphael, and even Phanuel to fight Nakash. The messengers, Seraphael and Raguel, were sent also. Yes, Yahweh has sent his 7 messengers to defeat Nakash, the heretic. Now, that's really fascinating right there with the 7 angels, because we're going to see, not this week, but next week, next Friday, we're going to see that the 7 holy angels here actually contrast the 7 planets, the 7 angels that were thrown into the lake of fire for deceiving mankind via being wandering stars. Nakash caused the earth to become desolate. So there it is right there. His nature was created to be in opposition for divine reasons. So according to the Sefer of the Two Pearls, it is Nakash who caused the earth to become desolate in Genesis 1:1. And, I think I probably slipped up there, and I actually put in my notes, is Nakash and Yekun the same Satan? Now, in the book of Enoch, it describes 5 Satans, and I argue the point that Gadril is actually Azazel, and Azazel is the main player in the Bible, because it says right here that Gadril is the one who led Eve astray. So when we get into Genesis 3, He's the third of the 5 Satans. However, well, let's just read this really quickly. And these are the chiefs of their angels and their names, and their chief ones over hundreds and over 50s and over 10s. The name of the first Satan is Yakun. That is the one who led astray all the sons of Alahayam. They brought them down to the earth and led them astray through the daughters of men. And the second was named Kesabel. He imparted to the holy sons of Alahayam evil counsel and led them astray, so that they defiled their bodies with the daughters of men. And the third was named Gadril. He it is who showed the children of men all the blows of death. And he led astray Chahwaha, that would be Eve, and showed the weapons of death to the sons of men, the shield and the coat of mail and the sword for battle, and all the weapons of death to the children of men. And from his hand they have proceeded against those who dwell on the earth from that day and forevermore. So again, my argument is that Gadril is Azazel, and he's the main player in the Bible. Whether these other 4 Satans show up, maybe they're interchangeable, I don't really know. I can't answer that. But we see in Revelation, by the time we get there, the dragon is the serpent of old. And the fourth was named Penemuel. He taught the children of men the bitter and the sweet, and he taught them all the secrets of the wisdom. This is skipping down here. And the fifth was named Cassiade. This is he who showed the children of men all the wicked smitings of Ruakoth and demons, and the smitings of the embryo in the womb. So he is the one that is killing babies to this day, or is, taught that abortion, that it may pass away, and the smitings of the soul, the bites of the serpent, and the smitings which befall through the noontide heats, the son of the serpent named Tabayet. So that's interesting right here. So is this saying that the fifth Satan is the son of the serpent named Tabayet? That's not the first time I've seen that these Satans are not the first generation, telling us that we don't know how many generations of these sons of Alahayam or angels go back. Anyways, that comes from Enoch chapter 69. So let's look at the destruction of the earth in Enoch. This comes from the dream vision of the deluge in chapter 83. And you're going to see this theme throughout. We've already covered a little bit about it, about the water going into the abyss, right? And of course, the abyss is in Genesis chapter, in the first verse. And now, my son, Methuselah, I will show thee all my visions, which I have seen, recounting them before thee. 2 visions I saw before I took a wife, and the one was quite unlike the other. The first, when I was learning to write; the second, before I took thy mother, when I saw a terrible vision. And regarding them, I prayed to Yahweh. I had laid me down in the house of my grandfather, Mahalalel, when I saw in a vision how the heaven collapsed and was borne off and fell to the earth. And when it fell to the earth, I saw how the earth was swallowed up in a great abyss. I mean, is that a description of Noah's flood? I guess I'll ask you that question. You can answer that yourself. I don't think it is. And mountains were suspended on mountains, and hills sank down on hills, and high trees were rent from their stems and hurled down and sunk in the abyss. Again, that's not a description of Noah's flood that were ever given in Genesis chapter 7 or any other extra biblical book dealing with Noah's flood. And thereupon a word fell into my mouth, and I lifted up my voice to cry aloud and said, the earth is destroyed. So make a mental note of that. The earth was swallowed up in a great abyss, and the mountains and everything was hurled down, sunk down into the abyss. We'll be reading more about that. Let's look at the waste earth in Isaiah, where thus says Yahweh, who created the heavens, Alahayam himself that formed the earth and made it. He has established it. He created it not in vain. He formed it to be inhabited. I am Yahweh, and there is none else. So again, the word tohu here, formlessness, confusion, unreality, emptiness. So what it's saying here is that he created it not to be in a state of tohu. So you can look at this argument in 2 ways. Okay, I'll give points to both sides. One is the young earth side is going to say, no, yeah, that's fine. It was in the state of tohu, but he was actually creating it. It was not intended to be in that state, right? Whereas the other side is going to say, well, no, it's only in the state of tohu because of a destruction event, right? So how do you read Isaiah 45? You can actually look at it from both sides. And I can't answer that question for you. The weight of the evidence seems to point, to the recreation event, in my opinion. So this is what it says, right? Okay, we can see it right here. I don't need to read this whole thing for you. One of the reasons I like to put whole passages in, even though I don't have time to read them all, is just so you can look at this. And because I don't like cherry picking, right? I like to have context. And the context here is well, actually, let's go ahead and read this. Just a little bit of this. This is what Yahweh says. The products of Egypt and the merchandise of Cush and the Sabians, men of stature, will come over to you and will be yours. They will walk behind you. They will come over in chains, will bow down to you. They will plead with you. Allahayam certainly is with you, and there is no one else, no other Allahayam. Truly, you are an Allahayam who hides himself, Allahayam of Yasharil, Yeshua. You could see there the interplay, that saying that the Allahayam of Yasharil is Yahweh or Yahweh, but he is also Yeshua. They're the one and the same. They will be put to shame and even humiliated, all of them. The manufacturers of idols will go away together in humiliation. Yasharel has been saved by Yahweh with an everlasting salvation. You will not be put to shame or humiliated to all eternity. For this is what Yahweh says. He who created the heavens, he is the Allahayam who formed the earth and made it. He established it and did not create a waste place, but formed it to be inhabited. I am Yahweh, and there is no one else. I have not spoken in secret in some dark land. I did not say to the offspring of Yaakov, seek me in a wasteland. I, Yahweh, speak righteousness, declaring things that are right. That comes from Isaiah 45. All right. Changing pace really quickly, and we will get back to this. Let's talk about justice and mercy, the seventh age of man. I'm going to be revisiting this theme for the next several weeks. This is coming from the Legends of the Jews, though you also see this quoted in other books. Finally, the Messiah was appointed to bring Yeshua, which would put an end to all sinfulness. Now, if I had shown you a paragraph earlier, this is great because this is coming from rabbinical testimony. They say that before the creation of the world, that the Messiah's name was pronounced in heaven. It was not announced to man below, but then it actually says that the Messiah was appointed to bring Yeshua. And it really incredible. The name of the Messiah is Yeshua, right? So think about this. Before the creation of this world, the Messiah was announced. I believe he is Yahweh. They said that his name would be Yeshua, would be salvation. Well, why is that? Well, here is why. Nor is this world inhabited by man, the first of things earthly created by Elohim. He made several worlds before ours. Say what? But he destroyed them all because he was pleased with none until he created ours. Well, why was he displeased with all the other worlds and only pleased with ours? Now, keep in mind, I could take you on a study like leading up to Noah's flood, and he's like, I repent of creating man. I'm destroying them. They've been nothing but heartache and terror and wicked. Again, then he saves Noah. He starts a new lineage through him. You go down to Abraham. He promises to make a family through him, the Hebrews. You get to Moses, and he's like, I am, these people are just nauseous to me. They are complainers and whiners, and they're wicked. I'm going to destroy them all. I'm going to start a whole new lineage through you, Moses. And of course, Moses intercedes and he saves them. But nonetheless, he was pleased with none until he created ours. But even this last world would have had no preeminence or permanence, would have no permanence if Elohim had executed his original plan of ruling it according to the principle of strict justice. It was only when he saw that justice by itself would undermine the world that he associated mercy with justice and made them to rule jointly. Thus, from the beginning of all things prevailed divine goodness, without which nothing could have continued to exist. So what just happened? What he's saying is that that he always ruled by justice. Actually, he would say in the Legends of the Jews, he always ruled by the Torah. Before the foundation of the earth, before the earth was actually laid down, before the first created things, eons ago, several worlds ago, the Torah existed and he ruled through the Torah. But finally, in this age, there was a paradigm change, a shift. What changed? The Messiah entered. Salvation. He's like, I'm going to save Yeshua, these people. I'm going to give them mercy. Even though they're going to be sinners, I'm going to uphold my end of the covenant I'm going to make. And we see this right here in Deuteronomy chapter 4. It says, for Yahweh Elohika is a merciful Al, or Allahayam. He will not forsake you, neither destroy you, nor forget the covenant of your fathers, which he swore unto them. And one of the themes of Deuteronomy, we just went through this, is saying that he's telling Yasharel before they enter the land, he's like, look, you're gonna do away with the Torah. You're gonna say it's no longer applies to you. You're going to be thrown out of the land because of your disobedience, of your rebellion to me against the Torah. And there's going to be a future generation that's going to rise up. Israel is going to be scattered all over the world. And when Israel rises up, they're going to return to my Torah again. And I'm going to be a merciful Allahayam to them. And I always want to remind people of this, that when you're coming into this ancient path and you're rediscovering the Torah and realizing that his instructions are for you, that he will be merciful to you, right? He will be gentle with you, and he will guide you through it. When you think how scary and anthropological it may be for your life, and you're afraid of messing up and not doing it right, just realize that what you from your ends, you want to have the transformed heart, right? That you want the Bible, you want the Torah to be a transformative document and change you, and just realize that if you're not doing it precisely right, because we are removed from thousands of years and we can't go and talk to Moses personally and the prophets and go, okay, how do you do this? And we have to basically go to all these different opinions on the internet about how we do it, that he will be merciful to us. Deuteronomy chapter 30 says this, and it shall come to pass when all these things are come upon you, the blessing and the curse, which I have set before you, and you shall call them to mind among all the nations, whither Yahweh Elohika has driven you. I just actually talked to you about this. And shall return unto Yahweh Elohika, and shall obey his voice according to all I command you this day. So he's saying in the end times, or any time in history, but even where we're at in history, when we begin to obey his voice as he commanded on that day in Deuteronomy, you and your children with all your heart and with all your soul, that then Yahweh Elohika will turn your captivity and have compassion upon you, and will return and gather you from all the nations, whether he has scattered you. Of course, the blessing and the curse, we can, Christianity is like, they get so upset about this idea of the blessing and the curse. It's like, well, wait a second. I thought you believed in heaven or hell, right? Like, people go to hell, right? And they're like, yeah, well, that's the curse. Death is the curse. And there's the final death too. That's the curse. That is where the curse, the idea is dying, you shall die. Adam and Eve didn't die right away, but they chose the curse, and they began to die. They were spiritually dead at that point. And there is a final death, of course, too. Or you could choose the blessing. You could be obedient and follow the ancient path, and you could, choose the blessing into eternity. Deuteronomy chapter 30. But there you go, right there. So this is according to this kind of framework of the several worlds before us, we are in the one where there is this big paradigm change, and now we have Messiah, and he is our savior, and he is showing us mercy instead of strict justice. He basically took the punishment for us, to put it in another way. Whereas in past worlds, it seems as though he did not take on the punishment for those individuals. So right here, we're looking at the geological column, and I pointed this out in the past. I am not an evolutionist. For the first probably 37 years of my life, or the whereabouts, I was a strict young Earth creationist. I was raised that the Earth is 6,000 years old, baby, and we're coming up on, we're somewhere around the 6,000 year mark according to the Masoretic timeline and the not the LXX timeline. And all of this is a deception, and this is, we're looking at Noah's flood all the way down to the what is it, the Proterozoic age down there. And but this has bothered me my entire life, and I would look at this and go, and I would ask people, I'm like, okay, so the T-Rex is in the Cretaceous, and they'll be like, no, he's only in the Jurassic. I'm like, so you never found a T-Rex in the Paleozoic. No, he's only in the Mesozoic, specifically in the Jurassic. Again, we can all argue about what is the hoax here, and are dinosaurs a hoax, this kind of stuff. But there is a scientific, type of consistency to this, and we are seeing these different layers. Now, what's fascinating about these geological columns, and this is where I think the young Earth creationists bring up a lot of great points, and I really appreciate the arguments they make. And even though I don't agree with all of them, this is one of those I don't agree with. I don't think they do a good job here. They cannot explain this. They have tried, and I have not seen them succeed. With these geological columns, there are 3 major extinction events. So you could see the cutoff there with the Paleozoic, the Mesozoic, and the Cenozoic. And you can see the people standing on, I guess, what are we in the Cenozoic now? I don't know. I don't know what they would call us now. But it seems to be that the Cenozoic would be Noah's flood, the different layers there. And of course, in a flood water, with tides coming in and out, you would actually get different layers. And anybody can do that experiment. You guys can pour different color sand really into like a jar, and you could watch the layers form. It's really easily done. But there appears to be a major extinction event in the Mesozoic period. And I will point out that scientists are starting to find more and more that there were mammals, despite what we grew up being told, in the Mesozoic area. There were like types of beavers, there were types of rabbits and deer and things like that living amongst the quote unquote dinosaurs, and their bones are discovered in those finds. They just don't advertise it to this day. Again, though, I am of the opinion that we are seeing in this quote unquote recreation event, we're seeing a replenishing from storehouses. So something happened in the Mesozoic. Was it the Prince of Tyre? Was it Nakash, right? And the dinosaurs are interesting because they're dragon-like seraphim creatures, which is what Nakash was, right? Are the dinosaur fossils, were they type of angelic creatures? I don't know. I can't answer that. And again, you have this quote here: "Nor is this world inhabited by man, the first of things earthly created by Elohim. He made several worlds before ours, but he destroyed them all because he was pleased with none until he created ours." A little detour really quickly. In the beginning, the Aleph and the Tav. Now, you can see here, I took a screenshot from, this is Bible Hub, which is a great resource for looking at modern Hebrew or Greek. And you could see right here in 853E, you see the ET right there. That is the Aleph and the Tav. And I highlighted, or I made it in red right here. So when basically anyone is transcribing the Bible, whether it's King James, NASV, NIV, whatever, they don't know what to do with that. And they just put in the beginning, created God the heavens and the earth. Actually, they'll put God created. It could be actually plural there. It could be multiple gods. Could be, we don't really know. In the beginning, Elohim created the heavens and the earth, and they leave out the Aleph and the Tav. But here's what I'm putting for a translation. Maybe it should read something like this: in the beginning, Elohim created the Aleph and the Tav, the heavens and the earth. It makes sense because immediately after that, he says, "Let there be light," and there was light. But how could he possibly say anything if he hadn't yet created the alphabet? You see what I'm saying? And of course, he says in Revelation, Hebrew Revelations, we're calling this the confidential counsels of Yahweh. It says, "I am the first and the last, the beginning and the end," says the mighty Adon, who was and is and it will be. Now, in the Greek Revelation, he says, "I am the Alpha and the Omega," right? So he's talking the Greek terms of the Aleph and the Tav. Here it just says the first and the last, but it seems to be implying the language as well. And of course, you guys all know John chapter 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, or the Word was with Elohim, and the Word was Elohim. He was in the beginning with Elohim. All things came to being through him, and without him, not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overtake it. So again, my suggestion is that in biblical translations, at least dealing with the modern Hebrew, it should say that in the beginning, Elohim created the alphabet, the Aleph and the Tav, the A and the Z, the Alpha and the Omega, the heavens, and the earth. That was a fun detour. Of course, we see this here, and it says this in Legends of the Jews. In the beginning, 2,000 years before the heaven and the earth, 7 things were created. The Torah was written with black fire on white fire and lying on the lap of God. The divine throne erected in heaven, which was later on the heads of the Hayat. Paradise on the right side of God, hell on the left side. I'll be talking about that next week. The focus next week will be the fire of Gehenna. Some translations actually say Gehenna. Here in the Legends of the Jews, it says hell. That was created before Genesis 1-2. The celestial sanctuary directly in front of God, having a jewel on the altar graven with the name of the Messiah, which is Yeshua, and a voice that cries aloud, "Return, ye children of men." The advice of the Torah was given with some reservation. She was skeptical about the value of an earthly world on account of the sinfulness of men who would be sure to disregard her precepts. But God dispelled her doubts. He told her that repentance had been created long before, and sinners would have the opportunity of mending their ways. Now, some of you might think that's really silly, that the alphabets or language would be having a conversation with him. I don't find that silly at all. When I go through the water passage in Genesis 1-2, I'll be showing how water itself has a consciousness, and that, basically language, everything that we speak, actually our thoughts, everything we think, but everything we speak from our mouth has a creative force to it. And being that water surrounds us, of course, water is in our body, we live in a watery realm, that it actually takes our words and it actually imprints the memories, and it actually can communicate back to us. It's really crazy, this realm we live in. So the idea that Elohim would be having a conversation with the Torah or with the Aleph and the Tav language itself, I would not find that surprising at all. Here's one more passage from Legends of the Jews. When God was about to create the world by his word, the 22 letters of the alphabet descended from the terrible and august crown of God, whereon they were engraved with a pen of flaming fire. They stood round about God, and one after the other spoke and entreated, "Create the world through me." All right. Now let's talk about what texts we actually have that seem to relate to what society was like beforehand, and specifically the destruction of this old world. So this comes from the scroll of Thotis, which I think is the same thing as Thoth, the Emerald Tablets. So this section is called the Motherland and the Scroll of Thotis, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And let me just check really quickly the source where this is coming from. This is a long section, so it's going to take me a while to scroll. This is from the Book of Manuscripts, which is in the Colburn Bible. I've never read this to you before. I think you're going to enjoy this. It's a bit of a long read, but just buckle up and sit down, drink some coffee, enjoy this. The first land on earth wherein men dwelt was not Kahimu. It was a land out beyond the salt waters. All right, so are they talking about Atlantis here, or are they talking about something more like Meru or Lamia? And you're going to see soon enough. To this land came the immortal spirit in the form of the radiant one from heaven. That's got Genesis written all over it, who had left his more enlightened place to dwell among beasts in the lower kingdom of sorrow. In some mysterious way, he became incarnated as man. How, we know not, but he found the race of man. It is not as recorded in tales told for the ignorant. Now, I will tell you what I'm reading here is not scripture. Okay, I do not believe that this is Ruach HaKodesh inspired scripture. So everything you're going to take in here is take with a grain of salt. It is interesting, though, that we appear to have some sort of incarnation of Elohim himself. And where have we seen this before? Has Yahushua HaMashiach shown up at other times in other creation accounts? All right, before our own. Something to consider. None knows in truth the old motherland or where it was. There are tales, but they disagree. And they do. They most certainly do. The 9 bows say it was southward. The learned priests are not united in thought. Some say towards the west, where the sun now sits, while others say towards the east, where the sun rises. Southward are great mountains and forest, monsters and men covered with hair, which is fascinating because we have multiple texts, including rabbinical texts, legends of the Jews, others. They talk about these great monsters that live in the south. Here, winds are formed where in the earth and issue forth from a black cavern. And that question has been arisen. Do winds form in Antarctica? I believe Enoch says the same thing. I don't have time to go over all that tonight, but that right there is just a connection that is fascinating in and of itself. It is a place of chaos where water, soil, and air are not separate. The old motherland could not have been there. To the left-hand side, there is a great wilderness to the land of Amua. The old motherland could not have given birth to such as these. To the right hand is the wide plain of man-eaters. Well, we have a lot of texts that talk about the man-eaters in the Far East, over on the other side of the Great Wall of China, and maybe even up in the north in the Gog Magog area. You see it on a lot of old maps, which stretches out to the far reaches of old Kahimu. This was barren even in the oldest times. To the north of the wilderness, the land is occupied by deformed men and dwarfs. It's interesting that a lot of the tales of the dwarfs come from the north. Germany, Britain, where amid this could have been the fertile pastures and plowlands well watered from the Sky River, where men lived in peaceful content. The old motherland was never there, nor, as some say, in the waters beyond, which boil at the extremity. Beyond the wide river, there was once a land graced with all riches needful to men, crowned by many walled Meru. There it is. Interesting. But it was not the land of our birth. Northward is the home of the cool breeze. But beyond the lands which skirt the salt water are the one-eyed peoples and the giants with white hair and eyes. Here the rocks and stones are of the whitest marble, and the trees bear white fruit. Thus in the whiteness the eyes of men are blinded in their youth, for even the grass grows white. Before this is the land of Hosugia, a place unproductive and barren, where fruit never appears on the trees and crops will not ripen. How could the old motherland lie in this direction? It's incredible the things they're describing in here. It's like, this does not describe our modern world. I think most of you out there listening will agree with me that the ancient world looked very, very, very different. Giants and dwarfs and all sorts of interesting creatures. In the old books, it is said that the old motherland was ruled by the Queen of Light, who was supreme above all. The temple tales tell that the lesser gods came to dwell among mortals when the mistress of brightness ruled in Kilathi, that they were sheltered in temples and priests were appointed to minister unto them. It is said that places of instruction were set up within the temples, but few men were taught the inner knowledge. It was rightly held that it would be a danger to those without wisdom, and it had to be safeguarded. Is this not the tale told in the Book of Beginnings? It is said that Kilathi lay within the borders of Kahimu, but could it not have been the land of similar sounding name outward from Pontus beyond God's land? It is not said of both that they were engulfed in fire and water. In the Book of Beginnings, it is said, the generations passed and a vast amount of knowledge and wisdom was accumulated and preserved in purity. It was the heritage of mankind, but though man had learned to cherish the light of truth and walk wisely with it, nevertheless, then as now, false priesthoods flourished. They pandered to the carnal desires of the undeveloped and exploited the weaknesses of the ignorant. Their iniquity built up a vast weight of evil in the netherworld, which projected itself into the material of earth, so that the powers which upheld it became unstable. So they're talking about these priests they became so corrupt in the old world that they actually were in tune with the spirits in Sheol, in the abyss. Again, which is interesting that we see this creature coming up, this Chesek creature. This caused all the southern part of old land to sink down into heaving waters. The disaster was brought about through the ascendance of evil. Rites which awakened the dead were rife among the carnal-minded and ignorant, while those who remained steadfast on the harder road of spiritual development had fixed their eyes on the light ahead, ignoring the pitfalls at their feet. It was then, even as now, will men ever learn? Apparently not. And, throughout was it Deuteronomy, Numbers, throughout the Torah, Yahweh is very strict about like necromancy, like that is the death sentence. Don't associate with them. Why is that so important for him? And we see, of course, the Witch of Endor. She's actually able. There's been so much commentary on this, on whether Yahweh allowed it to happen or is it a parlor trick. I'm of the opinion that she really did bring Samuel up, and that there's something to be said about this and why this was evil. And it says that they had rites which were awakening the dead. This was the aspect of the disaster as written in the Book of Beginnings. There were openings in the land from which evil vapors poured forth as a mist, descending upon the people like a mantle, spread out and covered the whole face of the land. The tongues of the people were stopped and they became dumb with fear. The ground trembled beneath them. The great tongues of flame shot up. The whole land heaved and rocked like an ocean wave. As it rose and fell, groaned and shook. The fires which strove beneath burst forth to be met with the shafts of lightning striking down from heaven. A thick black cloud of smoke filled the land, and men were smothered in dust. As the setting sun rested on the horizon, it could be but dimly seen beneath the cloud as a fiery red ball. When it had gone, a great dense darkness prevailed, lit only by great sheets of lightning. The waters broke heavily over the land, sweeping it clean. The plains and cities were covered, and new shores formed around the mountains. The waters mounted up until all that moved and lived was covered. The land was submerged. And I put in the notes there, Jeremiah chapter 4. We read through that. Mountaintops alone remained above the rush of uplifted torrent. Whirlwinds blew and brought cold winds, which cleared away the dust and debris. Mud banks were formed, and a mountain mouth remained open to spew forth vile vapors. During one long, awful night, the doomed land was torn apart and southward sank out of sight forever. Skipping ahead to 14. It is said men came out of the devastation. Behind them, the land sank and the earth shook. Mountains split apart and crumbled. Where once there had been a valley, now stood a mountain. And they conclude here, thus it is not impossible to discover where the old motherland lay. Therefore, there is hope, and men need not despair, for the secret may be rediscovered. When once again the sacred things rest in the old land from whence they came, the days of disturbance will cease, and once again men will live in peace. Men go forth to seek the road. All is not lost to us yet. That comes from the Book of Manuscripts. All right, so let's talk about Lamia, Mu, and Meru, and they did bring up the name, and there's kind of interesting. It is projected to be in over here near down under, near the Philippines. Some people have suggested that the Philippines, going all the way up to the Hawaiian Islands, all the islands through there, the Fiji, and I know there's got to be tens of thousands of islands. I don't know how many are in there, but those are the mountaintops when this land sunk. And it's kind of interesting that the text we just read ended with saying that the peaks of the mountains remained. So that's kind of interesting right there. Now, originally in the 1800s, zoologist Philip Sclater proposed the idea of a lost continent, and he gave it the name Lemuria. Why? Because he was looking at lemur fossils in both Madagascar and India and figuring out how in the world they were on Madagascar and in India. Was there some kind of land bridge there? So he proposed this idea that there was a continent there at one time. Nowadays, everyone goes with continental drift. So official, quote unquote, science is against the idea of a lost continent. In 1870, we see Ernst Haeckel. He was a German biologist from, of course, Deutschland. He's pushing Darwin's theory of evolution. So you see this idea of this lost continent held with our controllers with the Darwinists. Of course, you see Helena Blavatsky here, everyone's favorite nanny, theosophist nanny. And she was really big on it too. She called them the Lemurians, which is a really lame title. She's calling the people from this lost society after lemurs. I find that pretty embarrassing, actually. And then we see these two. I don't need to go over these two. They really started popularizing the theory in the 1870s. They actually met each other in a dig in Mexico. and they fell in love. They became lovers, and they were married for the rest of their life, committing research. And they were showing how the South Americans and the Mexican society, how they believe that they came from this long lost civilization, is kind of an interesting thought. But the guy who really pushed it forward was James Churchward, and he called it the continent of Mu. So you could see his proposed map there, going all the way from the Hawaiian Islands down to the Easter Islands. He includes Tahiti, Fiji. He doesn't include the Philippines in this map, which is kind of interesting, because a lot of people propose that the Philippines is the remnants of Eden. He says that, of course, he claims that he got his information from these Indian tablets, that these Indian priests were able to teach him how to decipher. Whether that's true or not, he was never able to come up with the evidence. It is interesting, however. I don't know if these people are innocent. I don't know if they're being drug out as, for control purposes. But it does appear like in the 1800s, when there was a big reset, that they're my opinion is that they're pushing this research out to discredit it. They're making it look silly and stupid because they have their own agenda they want to push forward. Nevertheless, yeah, it is interesting that Lemuria, Mu, and Maru all basically, they all fit. They all have the same, letters together. I do find that kind of interesting. All right, so let's look at destruction, recreation now in the Book of Creation. It is known, and the story comes down from ancient times, that there was not one creation, but two, a creation and a recreation. Now, if I take you through chapters 1 and 2, we don't have time for that in the Book of Creation. It plays out very much like Genesis chapter 1, but then you get to the end of it, and the earth is destroyed, and then it starts again, and you're like, oh, okay. And then you get into the whole Adam story. Chapter 4, this comes from the scroll of Kerubal Thurman, who wrote, "The forebears of all the nations of man were once one people, and they were the elect of God, who delivered all the earth over to them. All the people, the beasts of the field, the creatures of the wasteland, and the things that grow. They dwelt through long ages in lands of peace and plenty. There were some who struggled harder, were more disciplined, because their forefathers had crossed the great dark void. Their desires were turned Godward, and they were called the children of God. Their country was undulating and forested. It was fertile, having many rivers and marshes. There were great mountains to the east and to the west, and in the north was a vast stony plain. Then came the day when all things became still and apprehensive, for God caused a sign to appear in the heavens, so that men should know the earth would be afflicted, and the sign was a strange star. The star grew and waxed to a great brightness and was awesome to behold. It put forth horns and sang, being unlike any other ever seen. So men, seeing it, said among themselves, surely this is God appearing in the heavens above us. The star was not, however, God, though it was directed by his design, but the people had not the wisdom to understand. And then God manifested himself in the heavens. His voice was as the roll of thunders, and he was clothed with smoke and fire. He carried lightnings in his hand, and his breath, falling upon the earth, brought forth brimstone and embers. His eye was a black void, and his mouth an abyss containing the winds of destruction. He encircled the whole of the heavens, bearing upon his back a black robe adorned with stars. Such was the likeness and manifestation of God in those days. Awesome was his countenance, terrible his voice of wrath. The sun and moon hid themselves in fear, and there was a heavy darkness over the face of the earth. Now, I know if you're following along, you see the word Elohim here, and you're wondering, why am I saying God instead of Elohim? I ask myself that same question. When it comes to Hebrew scripture, of course, we're trying to turn it into the Paleo. And so I would say Elohim for that, even though I wrote it in here. This comes from out of Britain, and I just feel like it kind of takes a little bit out of context. In fact, I don't even know if Old English they would have used the word God. It would have been something slightly different, but I digress. God passed through the spaces of the heavens above with a mighty roar and a loud trumpeting. Then came the grim, dead silence, and I read this to you earlier tonight. And black red twilight of doom. Great fires and smoke rose up from the ground, and men gasped for air. The land was rent asunder and swept clean by a mighty deluge of waters. A hole opened up in the middle of the land. The waters entered and sank beneath the seas. We read that in First Enoch. The mountains of the east and west were split apart and stood up in the midst of the waters, which raged about. The northland tilted and turned over on its side. Then again, the tumult and clamor ceased, and all was silent. In the quiet stillness, madness broke out among men. Frenzy and shouting filled the air. They fell upon one another in senseless, wanton bloodshed. Neither did they spare woman or child, for they knew not what they did. They ran unseeing, dashing themselves to destruction. They fled to caves and were buried, and taking refuge in trees, they were hung. There was rape, murder, and violence of every kind. The deluge of water swept back, and the land was purged clean. Rain beat down unceasingly, and there were great winds. The surging waters overwhelmed the land, and man, his flocks, and his gardens, and all his works ceased to exist. Some of the people were saved upon the mountainsides and upon the flotsam, but they were scattered far apart over the face of the earth. They fought for survival in the lands of uncouth people amid coldness. They survived in caves and sheltered places. And of course, this is where a lot of the Maru, Lamia research kind of takes off, and the idea that the people of South America and Central America over there may have originated from that. I'm not saying that is what it is, but even if you read through the book He Walked the Americas with me, that's the testimony that they came from what they called the motherland. They were a different people. They may have been this people. Then look what else it says: the land of the little people, and the land of the giants, the land of the necklace ones, and the land of marshes and mists, the land of the east and west were all inundated. The mountain land, the lands of the south, where there was gold and great beasts, were not covered by the waters. So that's nice to know. The land of the little people was spared. Men were distracted and in despair. They rejected the unseen God behind all things for something which they had seen and known by its manifestation. They were less than children in those days and could not know that God had afflicted the earth in understanding, and not willfully, for the sake of man and the correction of his ways. Now, this is one of the things I love. I love this passage, and I want you to pull this away tonight. When we're talking about all this destruction, the earth is not for the pleasure of man, but is a place of instruction for his soul. Now, keep in mind that the soul is a separate animating force from our physical body. The idea is that you can remove our soul from our body, and our body will die and decay, but our soul can still be conscious. It's still going to have memories. Our soul can be put to sleep in Sheol, but our soul is put here in a material body, in a material earth, for the purpose of instruction. A man more readily feels the stirrings of his spirit in the face of disaster than in the lap of luxury. That's 100% true. The tuition of the soul is a long and arduous course of instruction and training. And so it was saying from Allah Hayam's perspective is that this world is actually perfect. It's a perfect world. Let's read this next line. God is good, and from good, evil cannot come. He is perfect, and perfection cannot produce imperfection. Only the limited understanding of man sees imperfection in that which is perfect for its purpose. The grievous affliction of man was another of his great tests. He failed, and in so doing, followed the paths of unnatural gods of his making. Man makes gods by naming them, but where in this is the benefit to him? Now, this is fascinating, because this is coming from the Book of Creation, and the Colburn Bible is really, really big on the evils of idolatry. And it's all saying how the true God, the true creator, Allah, he cannot be seen in any idol images. And yet mankind constantly wants to go back and entrap him into some sort of image that will not save him. An idol cannot be your Yeshua. And all throughout the Hebrew Bible, you see this constantly, where Yahweh is saying, I'm destroying you because of your idols. Because I hate these idols. And you keep doing it over and over and over again. When we get into, I think, Genesis 3, the days of, is it Jared? There was in the, was it Enosh, actually. There was actually a flood that came on the earth before Noah's flood. It actually destroyed a third of the world. The reason being is because of the idols. He hated it and he wanted to extinguish the idols, and still they continued on with the idols, even though a third of the earth was destroyed by a flood. So let's compare quickly the book of Creation, chapter 3, with the wisdom of Solomon 13. For all people who were ignorant of Elohim were foolish by nature, and they were unable from the good things that are seen to know the one who exists. It's almost like just lifted straight off of each other. Nor did they recognize the artisan while paying heed to his works. But they supposed that either fire or wind or swift air or the circle of the stars or turbulent water or the luminaries of heaven were the Elohim that rule the world. If through delight in the beauty of these things people assume them to be Elohim, let them know how much better than these is their Yahweh. For the author of beauty created them. And if people were amazed at their power in working, let them perceive from them how much more powerful is the one who formed them. That's Wisdom of Solomon 13. All right. We're going to jump now into Atlantis. And, I cannot answer the question for you whether Atlantis and Lemuria, Meru is the same. I think that they're separate. I think that they're separate places. Atlantis and the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. Though, again, we did see the, I already forgot how to pronounce his name, but it appears to be from a scroll talking about the motherland from the same individual Thoth. So maybe they are the same. Maybe the motherland is Atlantis. Can't answer that for you, but this is what it says. And for those of you, if technically this, because we're in a Bible study, we're in our Sabbath, I hope this doesn't make you guys feel uncomfortable. I am actually reading this to you to source, evidence, kind of textual evidence of a civilization that was destroyed. All right. Hopefully everyone understands that. And I don't know if I actually want to read the whole thing. Let me just, I'll skip around here. I, Thoth, the Atlantean, master of mysteries, keeper of records, mighty king, magician, living from generation to generation, being about to pass into the halls of Amenti, set down for the guidance of those that are to come after, these records of the mighty wisdom of great Atlantis. Actually, I have a few highlighted sections here I want to read for you guys. Great were my people in the ancient days, great beyond the conception of the little people now around me. So he's telling you, now this is not the land of the little people that we read about earlier. Those would be the fairies. I think that's a reference to the fairies, the little people. Of course, in my opinion, dwarves would also be included amongst the fairies. But this is basically saying that he is a giant. Like he's like a Rephaim type of Og type of king or entity that is ruling over the little people. That he says, the little people now around me, knowing the wisdom of old, seeking far within the heart of infinity, knowledge that belonged to earth's youth. Wise were we with the wisdom of the children of light who dwelt among us. Strong were we with the power drawn from the eternal fire. And of all these, greatest among the children of men were my father, Thothmame, keeper of the great temple, link between the children of light who dwelt within the temple and the races of men who inhabited the 10 islands. That's really interesting because that number 10 comes up a lot in terms of world districts. Okay, let's skip on down here. Downward into the darkness turn the thoughts of the Atlanteans. So they are becoming corrupt. Like they started out, the idea is, and I wasn't there. None of us were. None of us know what did Atlantis start out as a Torah type of, culture was were they worshiping Elohim, the true creator? We really don't know. But what we do know, according to all texts, is that they went into a very dark place. They began to rebel against the precepts of heaven, just as it is with society over and over again. So downward into the darkness turned the thoughts of the Atlanteans. Over the world then broke the great waters, drowning and sinking, changing earth's balance until only the temple of light was left, standing on the great mountain on Undul, still rising out of the water. Some there were who were living. That's a little confusing how that's written. Saved from the rush of the fountains. Called to me then the master, saying, gather ye together my people. Take them by the arts ye have learned of far across the waters, until ye reach the land of the hairy barbarians, dwelling in caves of the desert. Follow there the plan that ye know of. I don't know who these hairy barbarians are. I don't know if this is like talking about like Neanderthal type people, or just, like we're the hairy barbarians, or if this is talking about the wild men, the Sasquatch type creatures, or we'll read in the Book of Creation, the Yoslings. That could very well be it as well. But of course, the wild men that we see in like Sumerian texts. Gathered I then my people and entered the great ship of the master. Upward we rose into the morning. Dark beneath us lay the temple. Suddenly over it rose the waters, vanished from earth, until the time appointed was the great temple. Fast we fled toward the sun of the morning, until beneath us lay the land of the children of Kim. Raging they came with cudgels and spears, lifted in anger, seeking to slay and utterly destroy the sons of Atlantis. Then raised I my staff and directed a ray of vibration, striking them still in their tracks as fragments of stone of the mountain. If I'm understanding that right, he is using a staff that has sends out vibrations that is able to turn people into stone. If I'm reading that right, that's his weapon that he uses against his enemies. And of course, that will lead us into mud fossils. Then spoke I to them in words calm and peaceful, telling them of the might of Atlantis, saying we were children of the sun and its messengers. Cowed I them by my display of magic science, until at my feet they groveled when I released them. So it looks like these people were coming to kill the last Atlanteans as they're coming on their boats. Atlantis was destroyed. They're coming as refugees to this new land. They're trying to kill him. And he's like, fine, then I'll just turn you to stone. And then they basically bow before him, defeated. Long dwelt we in the land of Kim, long and yet long again, until obeying the commands of the master, who while sleeping yet lives eternally, I sent from me the sons of Atlantis, sent them in many directions, that from the womb of time wisdom might rise again in her children. Long time dwelt I in the land of Kim, doing great works by the wisdom within me. Upward grew into the light of knowledge, the children of Kim, watered by the rains of my wisdom. So what we pulling away here, and you can see right here, he says, builded I the great pyramid, pattern after the pyramid of earth force. That's kind of interesting. There's a lot we can make of this individual. But I think the big takeaway here is that he's claiming Atlantis was destroyed, the society, and the people were dispersed over all the earth. We also saw a little bit earlier that the books did not survive. And the reason being is that it appears that they were too concerned about their mysteries being spread about amongst the vulgar. And so it kind of had a reverse effect that history was lost with them. So here we see a picture of proposed picture, an illustration of what Atlantis looked like according to Plato. And this is Critias speaking, but I believe this comes from, hopefully I sourced it right. This comes from Critias, from Plato. He talks about it in two separate books. So again, for the lack of time, I'll just cover a couple highlighted sections here. In the first place, you remember a single deluge only, which is interesting because people in Plato's time all believed that the world was destroyed by a flood. But he says, but there were many previous ones. And this is where I asked the question earlier, was Peter talking about Noah's flood or multiple floods when he said that there was a shift from water to fire, which Nimrod, when we get to Nimrod, I'll talk more about how he was the first to figure that out. And he started worshiping fire. In the next place, you do not know that there formerly dwelt in your land the fairest and noblest race of men which ever lived, and that you and your whole city are descended from a small seed or remnant of them which survived. And this was unknown to you because for many generations the survivors of that destruction died, leaving no written word. And then there it is again, right? They brought down no books with them. For there was a time before the great deluge of all, when the city which now is Athens was first in war and in every way the best governed of all cities. So what Plato, or the character Critias, is saying is that the city of Athens is resting by its heritage on an even more ancient city. The ancient city wasn't called Athens, but whatever it was called at the time, these Athenians were at war with Atlantis. All right, that's what he's setting up here. He says that this happened 8,000 years or 9,000 years before, which would, according to official history, would now be placing us like close to 12,000 years ago, 11 to 12,000 years ago. They say this happened. Why is that interesting? Because when you look at the moon map, and I've shown you guys this before, the idea is that it takes about, was it 26,000 years for the sun to make a complete circuit around the zodiac. And so the idea is that the earth can be void and in chaos for about 15,000 years or so, 12,000 years. The sun goes back around and then it reforms again. So we could be looking at a scenario where that's why I started out saying, was the silence between the recreation and the destruction 7 days? Was it 30 minutes? Or was it thousands of years? We don't really know. But then you have to ask the question, well, if it was thousands of years, how do you have human survivors, right? So you just add that all up and come to your own conclusion. This power came forth out of the Atlantic Ocean. For in those days, the Atlantic was navigable. And there was an island situated in front of the straits, which are by you called the Pillars of Hercules. This would be on the south coast of Spain. Now, in this island of Atlantis, there was a great and wonderful empire which had rule over the whole island and several others, and over parts of the continent. And furthermore, the men of Atlantis had subjected the parts of Libya within the columns of Heracles as far as Egypt, and of Europe as far as Tyrrhena. All right, now, skipping down, but afterwards there occurred violent earthquakes and floods, and in a single night, a night of misfortune, all your warlike men in a body sank into the earth, and the island of Atlantis in like manner disappeared in the depth of the sea. For which reason the sea in those parts is impassable and impenetrable, because there is a shoal of mud in the way, and this was caused by the subsidence of the island. Now, this right here is proposed by many to be the Atlantis that Plato is talking about. I have reasons for thinking no, but again, I wasn't there. I mean, who am I to say yes or no? This, of course, is the Eye of the Sahara. If you're curious, it is on the western end of Africa. And the fascinating thing about the Eye of the Sahara, it's called the Rikat structure. You can see right there on Google Maps. You could actually see that there was a massive flood that formed the Sahara Desert that came over. This, to me, that looks like a post-Noah deluge. This doesn't really line up with what I would propose to be the Atlantis story, certainly not even pre-Diluvian. My point being is that this structure right here was not necessarily destroyed by this flood. This flood could have been coincidental, come within the last few thousand years, and caused that. But nevertheless, this ring structure, when you get more into Plato, how he describes it, this is pretty much a perfect fit for Atlantis, except for a couple little details. Specifically, where he describes it is right here in Spain, past the Pillars of Hercules, right past Gibraltar. And it's called, the national park is called Donana National Park in Spain. Well, Plato says that this sunk into the water and now it's all muddy and unnavigable, which is a perfect description for this national park in Spain. They have some explorers have gone and done some detective work here, and they've taken all sorts of scans, and they have said that underneath this is a huge mud bank here. And they said it used to be a part of the ocean, and they said that this is what it looked like. You can see right here that there were these rings. It was an island in the water, and that there was a channel coming from the ocean, and that you could go in there. And this is exactly where Plato described it. So going back up here to the Eye of the Sahara, what's going on? My opinion on this is Well, one is that Plato, could have had some of his information wrong. It is interesting, nonetheless, that he is describing the exact location where they found this. He was describing a confederacy, that there were multiple type of Atlantis societies. And so my proposal is that the Eye of the Sahara was a type of Atlantis society in the Confederacy. Maybe they had these islands all around. I've also proposed that this lines up with Tarshish. Unfortunately, I don't have the time to do a study on Tarshish tonight. I hope to, maybe in Genesis 1 at some time. Was Tarshish the Atlantis society, as some people proposed? Then you have, problems with Jonah going to Tarshish, or the fact that they brought, jewels and such to Solomon. Nevertheless, it has been proposed that it was a type of Atlantean society. Hopefully that's not confusing to you. All right. Now, points go out to Roger Spur of Mud Fossil University. If I do not mention his name, I will have 1,000 people coming and leaving comments. So everybody knows that. I don't know if Roger Spur is an awesome guy. I actually don't know if he discovered this or not, but he has talked about this for so long on his channel. He has probably dozens, if not hundreds, of videos talking about the dragon of North Africa. And you can see right here the whole body. You can see Northern Africa appears to be a dragon. You can see the tail whipping all the way down towards Tunisia over here. And the Western Sahara, you can see what looks to be an eye and a mouth that is opened up. You see his neck kind of bent down. His wing would go up here towards the Straits of Gibraltar up here. And where I have stated, and Roger again is an awesome guy. I've had private phone conversations with him. He's just a wonderful guy. I am of the opinion that actually this flow might be like blood or something, some sort of liquid coming. I think he died here. I do not believe he's eating a giant fish. Okay, I think this is actually a flow coming out of his mouth. I think he was hunted. And it wasn't until I read from chapter 3, this just blew my mind. All right. So I started reading from this earlier tonight, and I cut it off on purpose and jumped to chapter 4. I don't know if you noticed. So starting from the top in chapter 3, and this is leading up to Genesis 1-2. All right. It is known, and the story comes down from ancient times, that there was not one creation, but two, a creation and a recreation. And they're going to tell you how we're going into the Genesis account. It is a fact known to the wise that the earth was utterly destroyed once, then reborn on a second wheel of creation. Now, to be fair, this dragon that it is talking about here could be referring to a couple of comets in the sky. I don't believe they are. I believe they're talking about two literal dragons. And of course, the Ouroboros can easily be visualized here. And that's how Plato talks about the destruction and recreation anyways. He's basically telling the same story. And at the time of the great destruction of earth, God caused a dragon from out of heaven to come and encompass her about. So surprise ending, I actually believe that this is the dragon. I think there is a good case if you made this is the dragon it's talking about. You'll see why in a second. The dragon was frightful to behold. It lashed its tail. It breathed out fire and hot coals, and a great catastrophe was inflicted upon mankind. The body of the dragon was wreathed in a cold, bright light, and beneath on the belly was a ruddy hued glow, while behind it trailed a flowing tail of smoke. It spewed out cinders and hot stones, and its breath was foul and stenchful, poisoning the nostrils of men. Its passage caused great thunderings and lightnings to rend the thick, darkened sky, all heaven and earth being made hot. The seas were loosened from their cradles and rose up, pouring across the land. There was an awful, shrilling trumpeting, which outpowered even the howling of the unleashed winds. Men stricken with terror went mad at the awful sight in the heavens. They were loosed from their senses and dashed about, crazed, not knowing what they did. The breath was sucked from their bodies, and they were burnt with a strange ash. Then it passed, leaving earth enwrapped within a dark and glowing mantle, which was rudely lit up inside. I've ran out of coffee. Isn't that sad? I have a little bit of cold coffee left. It's getting late. The wrath of the sky monster was loosed in the heavens. It lashed about in flaming fury, roaring like 1,000 thunders. It poured down fiery destruction amid a welter of thick black blood. So awesome was the fearfully accepted thing that the memory mercifully departed from man. His thoughts were smothered under a cloud of forgetfulness. The earth vomited forth great gusts of foul breath from awful mouths opening up in the midst of the land. The evil breath bit at the throat before it drove men mad and killed them. Those who did not die in this manner were smothered under a cloud of red dust and ashes, or were swallowed by the yawning mouths of earth, or crushed beneath crashing rocks. The first sky monster was joined by another, which swallowed the tail of the one going before. So there you have your Ouroboros, get it? But the two could not be seen at once. Okay, so I mean, think about like an airplane up in the sky, right? Like 30,000 feet up. It looks like this little tiny thing. This thing is so massive, so huge that from the earth you're looking up, you cannot see the whole thing. It is like the sky is completely darkened, and it's overpowering basically your entire continent. I think this dragon that's describing is so big, it's what we actually see in Africa. The sky monsters reigned and raged above the earth, doing battle to possess it, but the many-bladed sword of God cut them in pieces. What does that remind us of? Where Yahuwah says he created the Leviathan for sport. And their falling bodies enlarged the land and the sea. All right, so again, just look up here at the picture, and that's exactly what happened. This dragon has enlarged northern Africa, the land and sea right here. Literally, northern Africa is like the decomposed, mud fossil, the body of a dragon that has become the land. Incredible. And Spur talks about that a lot, about how the whole earth is basically just biological. Essentially, we're just walking on the decomposed bodies of giants and those of former ages. Let's see, where was I? In this manner, the first earth was destroyed by calamity descending from out of the skies. The vaults of heaven had opened to bring forth monsters more fearsome than any that ever haunted the uneasy dreams of men. Men in their dwelling places were gone. Only sky boulders and red earth remained where once they were. But amidst all the desolation, a few survived, for man is not easily destroyed. They crept out from caves and came down from the mountainsides. What does that remind you of? The kings of the earth hiding in the, asking for the rocks to fall upon them. It says that in Enoch as well. Their eyes were wild and their limbs trembled. Their bodies shook and their tongues lacked control. Their faces were twisted and the skin hung loose on their bones. That sounds like a rough night's sleep. They were as maddened wild beasts driven into an enclosure before flames. They knew no law, being deprived of all the wisdom they once had. And of course, we can go through wisdom literature and show you that the law, the Torah, is wisdom. And those who had guided them were gone. So they're saying they had no wisdom, no law. So that's kind of an interesting connection there. The earth, only true altar of God, had offered up a sacrifice of life and sorrow to atone for the sins of mankind. Man had not sinned indeed, but in the things he had failed to do. Man suffers not only for what he does, but for what he fails to do. Isn't that the truth? We often think about sin in context of things that we have done, but transgressing can also be the things we fail to do, transgressing the law. He is not chastised for making mistakes, but for failing to recognize and rectify them. Of course, I showed you give you the Ouroboros right there. There was a comment I wanted to make before I moved on, and now I kept reading and I forgot. So now I just feel stupid just sitting here and not saying anything. Oh yeah, this is what I was going to say. This comment up here when it says the vaults of heaven had opened to bring forth these monsters. So it's like this idea that this dragon was, reserved up in heaven for this hour. There is a line in Wisdom of Solomon I wish I had put in here now. And when Solomon is recounting through wisdom, through Chakamaha, or through the Ruach HaKodesh, and he's recounting the wilderness generation of Yasharel. They're wandering through the wilderness, and Yah is so sick of them. He's like, I just want to destroy these people. And actually, there's a line in there where he says that he almost, if the translation is correct, saying that he basically wanted to create a dragon just to come down and take them all out. And so you get this idea that at any point in history, he could create a new creature, a type of dragon, to come and take people out if he wants to. Of course, he's Yah. He can do that if he wants. I'm going to close tonight. I didn't want to let this line slip by us. And this comes from, again, we saw this in the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. And he says, this is when he's fleeing to the land. And he said, then and so the people meeting them, they want to destroy the last sons of Atlantis. And he says, then raised I my staff and directed a ray of vibration, striking them still in their tracks as fragments of stone of the mountain. So it's this idea where we get Medusa, right? Now, maybe even Medusa was in Greek times, it was just lost to us over the last 2,000, 3,000 years. Like, in Homer's time, right? 2,000 years ago, maybe there was a weapon or this spiritual entity, a seraphim-like serpent creature that was going around turning people into stone. Well, look what it says in the Colburn Bible in Book of Gleanings 3:5. In olden times, there were spawned great monsters and beasts in fearful form with frightful gnashing teeth and long ripping claws. And the elephant was but a rat in comparison with them. So these creatures were so large, an elephant is but a rat. Then because of heavenly rebellion and turmoil and the terror overwhelming the hearts of men, the great one hardened the face of the land, which had become unstable, and the beasts were changed to stone. That's really interesting, isn't it? By the way, when we talk about dinosaurs and are they a hoax or not, and I have explained in recent videos, in the last Kingdom Verse video, if you want to look that up, I gave about 3 weeks ago, I went into great description about going through the Smithsonian and being overwhelmed with how underwhelmed I was by the dinosaur fossils, meaning that they were very little. I was like, I guess when I was a kid, dinosaurs are huge, but I'm like, the Stegosaurus is the size of a cow, and the sauropod was not that, like, they weren't that big. All right, so an elephant would not be a rat in comparison to these dragons. We're talking about much larger creatures. But here we see, some mud fossils, right? Elephants, collection of elephants. Are these real elephants? Were they turned to stone, or are they just so happen to, does the rock just so happen to look like elephants? Can't tell you, don't know. However, just skimming through these real quick, we're out of time. This right here, this mountain in Spain, in Montgo, Spain, I am 100% convinced that this is a giant mammoth. I have the man YouTube channel. His name, you can look Stellium7, Stellium7. Go look him up. Look at his stuff. I have interviewed him on the phone personally. He's a great guy, really nice. And he has done. I'm trying to find like a picture because I took this picture on a Google Maps, and you're looking at this going like, I don't see it, Noel. But on this picture right here, you can see this looks like a giant like mammoth or mastodon. You see the huge cone-shaped hump of a head down right here. Actually, that might be the cavity right there where the tusk was. And I wrote a whole paper on this, so I'm not going to read it to you here, but you can look it up under my mud fossil paper on my website. And so here you see the spine, and on the left here, stage left, it's the most decayed because this is actually facing the ocean, and it's all collapsed. It's gotten the sea waves pushing on it for thousands of years, but the right side is the most preserved of this. And he has done some amazing work on this, where you're seeing where the sockets go for the eyes, for the ears, for the tusk, for the mouth. He shows, it's unbelievable work that he's done. I think that's the eye socket right there. Yeah. And not only that, you can see the ground is really red, and around it, you can see this huge blood flow here. And so the idea that he has proposed is that this giant elephant, it was so big, it would stomp and just take out a village, right? He would roll over and bye-bye Los Angeles, right? This is a huge, huge titan of an elephant in the ancient world before Genesis 1-2. And the idea is that he was slain. Who slayed him? Was it Yahuwah who personally slayed him? Was it, the gods? Who did it, right? But he was killed. He is actually in a position where he has compared, and I did as well, compared with pictures of elephants that were poached, which are terrible pictures, but it's laying in the same position with the trunk and everything. It looks like it was killed and the blood flowed out. And I'm going to end there tonight. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. I do confess that, I feel like I could keep talking for another hour. I'm at a good point right now. Going into this, I was really choppy and I just wasn't feeling it. I had to work my way into it. But I'll be doing this, of course, next week. We'll be going through Genesis chapter 1. It's going to take several weeks, 7-8 weeks. Don't quote me on that. We just covered Genesis 1:1. Next week, we will also be in Genesis 1:1. Next week, I'll be covering the origins of Gehenna and showing how Gehenna plays into the millennial kingdom. And and also I really want to push the point of annihilationism, the idea that, the soul can be, the second death is actual total irrevocable, irreversible death. Like you can never get that person back again. It's over. It's done. There's not eternal torment. We're going to be looking at that next week. And the reason being is that we read tonight, and I'll be showing you more along those lines, that Gehenna was actually created before Genesis 1:2. It was created for the old civilization of people as well. They also went there. We, of course, saw the abyss coming alive at this time. So with that, enjoy your week, everyone. Enjoy your Sabbath day. Hope you guys get a lot of rest. Love you guys. We will do this again. Good night, everyone.